Sometimes we care for our plants because they need it, and sometimes we care for our plants because we need it. Today was one of those days that I care for my plants because I needed it. I was having a really rough day today, and so I decided, let me get my hands dirty a little bit, let me get into my plants. And I thought, you know what, I'll take you along with me, even if it's just to watch what I'm doing. I want my channel to be not just a place for joy, light, and excitement, but I want it to be an accurate reflection of the ups and downs that happens in caring for plants, but also in myself as I care for my plants. So today, I hope you enjoy this voiceover as you join me on this sort of mental health planty moment is what I want to call it. I'm using New Zealand tree fern fiber for the very first time. It can become quite dusty. Wet it before using it. Honestly, I have not watched any videos of others using tree fern fiber. This is this is my first go at it. I'm putting some of the fiber into a mix that I've already made. The video is on my Patreon channel. I'll link it down below. And this is a soilless, sort of a very chunky mix. I'm adding a little extra perlite just to keep things extra chunky because I'm going to put my anthurium into this. The first plant on our list today is my Anthurium warocreanum. You've probably seen it in my haul video when I got it about a month ago, and this is what it looks like now. So I think it's hanging in there. I expected it to lose that older leaf, so I'm not overly worried. Anyways, if you know me well, you know that I do not like keeping plants in the substrate that they came in, and it's still in that substrate right now. I just didn't want to repot it immediately since I wanted to give this very fussy-ish plant, and I'm doing air quotes here when I say this. I wanted it to sort of acclimate in my environment first. A privilege I don't give to other plants, but to fussy, expensive ones, yes, I'll give them that privilege. Have you ever, while repotting a plant, immediately regretted repotting it? I was having this moment right here. When I saw the roots, when I saw the substrate, I started immediately regretting that I had repotted this plant. I guess I felt that way because of how good it looked. I was worried because I couldn't tell how the roots looked in that substrate. I didn't know if my environment was beneficial for this plant in this substrate because the grower would have made the substrate for her environment. So I wasn't sure, but apparently the plant was looking pretty good. The roots were healthy. There was absolutely zero mush, no brown roots. It was actually really happy. I was quite impressed. I didn't know what to expect when I went at them. This is actually, I haven't said this yet, but this is my first time repotting an anthurium, especially a rare anthurium. I've never done it before. Just taking a look at the substrate, I can tell that she had added some sphagnum moss in this substrate, some perlite, and a couple other elements. I think there was some tree fern in here as well. But overall, the plant didn't have a lot of roots. I was expecting a lot more roots because Anthurium had the reputation of being very rooty plants. But yeah, I'm just happy that everything looked good and that I saw no signs of pests. Anyways, I'm trying to remove as much as the sphagnum moss as possible because I don't want the roots to hang on to too much moisture. I want to sort of give the plant a brand new start as I put it into my substrate. I'm still trying to figure out this plant. If you look at the leaf in the back, you can see it's curling just a little bit. And I have a feeling it's due to high light. It's getting maybe a little bit too much light. So I'm going to try to improve on that a little bit. Next, you're getting a glimpse into me creating my pest control mix. This is a little bit of horticultural oil. I've made this so many times that I can make it by eyeballing it. So that's water in the bottle, and I just added a little bit and I'm just mixing it together. I just left some room so that I can mix it in nicely. And I'm going to spray the roots just to be able to ward off or get rid of any pests that might have been on the roots, any eggs, anything along those lines. I just want to treat those roots to make sure that I'm not carrying anything over into my new substrate. I've washed my pot, or my cup I should say, and I'm going to put the plant back in there. I've added leca down below to create a reservoir for it because the plant will have no drainage and I don't want to risk overwatering the plant. My reservoir will end, or my water level will end where the leca ends. So basically where my substrate and leca meet, that's where my reservoir will end. This mix also has coconut chunks in here, and sometimes when the chunks are too big, they can retain too much moisture, and I don't want to risk overwatering these roots, so I'm just going to break them apart in addition to breaking apart the horticultural charcoal. I still want some really good airflow in here. When I was editing this video, I had to go back to see if I had accidentally slowed down the footage, but I'm actually moving this slowly because I just wanted to be so careful with this plant. I don't want to damage any of the leaves, well, apart from the one that's already on its way out, but especially that new little growth that's coming in there. I don't want to damage it in any way, or the roots. I'm being so careful because I'm new to this plant. I'm new to Anthurium altogether. One thing I wish I had while doing this was a chopstick. Because this is so airy, sometimes it can create too many gaps into the substrate. So I think a chopstick would have been great to sort of poke inside, to sort of help the substrate to sort of shimmy down into place to reduce the size of the air pockets. But overall, I think it looked pretty good. I was very happy with my mix. And that's it. Well, for now, this is what it looks like. I think the substrate looks great. It's nice and chunky, but still a little bit water retentive. And when I'm done everything and I get my sphagnum moss, I will add some on top. The next plant has shocked me. This new leaf has shocked me. This plant is the Anthurium wendlingeri. I think that's what it's called. I think I'm saying it properly. Anyways, because this has a new leaf that's hardening off, I want to be extremely careful because I've heard that new Anthurium leaves are very delicate, and if you sort of rub them the wrong way, when they harden off, you'll start to see where you sort of nicked them and where they were damaged. So I don't want this leaf to get damaged, so I'm being super cautious. I checked the pots for pests. I didn't see anything, and the roots look surprisingly good for how water retentive this mixture is, or was, I should say. This substrate was literally like sponge. I felt like I was removing sponge off of the roots. I don't know how this could be so dense, but so airy at the same time. I don't know. I guess that's what a sponge is, right? It retains water and has space for airflow. But, anyways, I'm being again super careful, super cautious. I don't want to damage any of the roots or that new leaf, especially because the roots can sometimes go through the sponges. And when you try to take it off, you can sort of rip some of the roots with them. So, you'll see me be very, very careful and deliberate here. Another thing, but I couldn't quite capture it on camera, is that it was sitting in a plug. So, plugs, sometimes when you get new plants, you'll notice that there's a little bag, or they're sort of sitting inside of, yeah, bag is the best way I could call it, a tight mesh. And sometimes it can prevent the roots from really pushing out the way they want to. So I'm trying very carefully to take the plug off once again without damaging those roots. I know, right? My playlist is sort of all over the place. So I'm just spraying the roots down once again with my horticultural oil just to ensure that if there's anything on there, it's gone. Sometimes I find it hard to know how big to make the reservoir in my no drainage pots. And I guess I'm still figuring it out. There are pros and cons. If you make it really big, the pro is that you don't have to water as much because your reservoir is really big. It's like having a really big self watering pot. But the con is that sometimes that water can become quite stale. So you still have to replenish it. Even if it's maybe halfway, it's still good to add some more oxygen and nutrients into the water. It's important to find a nice balance of how big your reservoir should be. I don't think there's a rule. I just like to eyeball it depending on the plant and what I'm going for, I guess. I'd like to take a moment to thank you so much for still being here and for watching this video. Thank you so much for all the support that you've given me throughout the entire year. I really appreciate it. And if you're just visiting and you haven't yet subscribed, you might want to consider subscribing. It's absolutely free and it could notify you on when I release a new video, because I think you might enjoy my other videos. If you like this one, feel free to give it a thumbs up. I'd really appreciate that. It helps out my channel quite a bit. As much as I love self-watering pots, there's something about clear vessels, clear glass vessels, that has my heart. I think the pleasure of not only seeing your roots, but seeing the substrate, it just looks so beautiful. And I'm loving having my anthurium in this substrate, in this glass, I should say. Well, and the substrate too. Next on the docket is my Hoya DS70. And you didn't think that this whole video would happen without a Hoya, right? I have too many Hoya for me to possibly have a repotting session without a Hoya included. This is probably in like my top 20 plants of the year. It is gorgeous. This plant, I wouldn't call it a thirsty plant, but it does use up water quite quickly, but it's very resilient. It can handle being underwatered very well. Anyways, I think this plant could grow a little bit faster if I had it in a self-watering pot. I'm not in a rush, but I want it to be at its best. I want it to perform at its fullest potential. So anyways, I'm just going to put it in the self-watering pot, and I like this one only because the reservoir is at the bottom, which gives the plant a little bit more height, and it will help for those beautiful dangling vines. Yes, the reservoir is not currently attached, that's why you can't see it. The roots look really nice and healthy. I'm very happy with how it looks. It's currently living in my DIY mix again. That's on my Patreon channel. You can find that there. I forgot to mention this earlier, but I'm wearing gloves because I was dealing with the horticultural oil and I just want to be a little bit careful when handling that, but I just forgot to take them off. So that's why you're going to have tacky blue gloves for the rest of this video. Here's a question. What do you watch or listen to while doing your plant chores? For me, it depends on my mood. If I'm not in the best mood and I'm doing my plant chores like today because I need a pick me up, I will do it while listening to music. I actually have a playlist. It's called my bedtime playlist. No, it's not public, it's like my private playlist, but it just has a lot of music that makes me happy or just keeps me calm and brings me to a good place. It involves some of my favorite artists, but it has a lot of soundtrack music. So I love watching Korean shows and I love listening to the soundtracks to some of my favorite shows. I'm also learning Korean. Fun fact, you probably did not know this about me, but I am. And so listening to the songs helps me to practice my Korean and get a little bit better at it. If I'm in a great mood or sort of in the frame of mind that's open and is ready to take in information, I like to watch YouTube videos about tech stuff. It's not that I'm a techie person who loves technology. I just want to know how to use my current technology better, like my cameras, my computers, my phones. I just like knowing how I can use them to their fullest potential to match what I need them to do. So I love watching those types of videos. I like watching videos about how to create better videos, how to make it more interesting. I want to make my channel interesting for my viewer, but I also want it to be fun for myself. So I I want to have fun while I'm doing this and not just do it just for the sake of putting out content. And so watching videos on how to help me to do that better helps me to build my joy for it. And yes, just like you, I like watching planty videos as well. I do have some of my favorite YouTubers, like big ones that I love watching, but I also like watching some small content creators. I like watching those with the smaller followings, and I try to keep space for not just the big YouTubers, but also the small ones too, because I appreciate being supported as a small YouTuber. So I try to make an effort to support smaller YouTubers as well, especially the planty ones. I've prepared my sphagnum moss with fertilized water. I got it all hydrated and ready to place on top of my plants. So I'm sort of dressing the top of my substrate with this. And also, I've totally forgot I needed to fill up the reservoir. So I'm just adding some water to the top, sort of to mesh everything together nicely and to partially fill up that reservoir. The sphagnum moss at the top will help the plant to, the substrate, I should say, to hold on to that moisture a little bit longer because the substrate is so airy, it can dry out a little too fast. So I wanted to have that balance. The next plant we'll care for today is one of my favorites. It's my Philodendron Florida Beauty. I'm in love with it. I've noticed that it's getting taller and taller, and eventually it's going to need some support. Actually, it currently needs some support because it's going to fall soon, and I don't want it to fall and damage the leaves. I want it to size up and grow upwards. It's currently growing in a self-watering pot and is growing in that little space. If you look over my shoulder a little bit to the left, you'll see a little empty spot there. That's where it lives, getting some light from my Sansi grow light. So anyways, I think I'm going to put it, not I think, I am going to put it on a moss pole right now. But to do that, I'm going to put it in a pot that's a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to have enough room to insert my moss pole. I usually use Molly's Arid Mix when I'm caring for a plant that I think might be sensitive, tricky, fussy, etc. So this plant, when I potted it up originally, I put it into Molly's Arid Mix because also at that time I was sort of perfecting my own mix. The mix has worked beautifully for it. The roots are quite happy, no rotting, but it does keep the plant quite moist. But it seems to be happy. I'm not going to disrupt the roots at all. I'm not going to shake them. It's not root bound or anything. So I'm just going to place it as is right inside of the pot. And I'm going to use the moss bowl to steady it into place. Backfill the pot. Sorry, that's my cat begging for attention. And then fill up that pool. When I started collecting houseplants a couple years ago, I never thought that I would get as into moss bowls as I have so far. I never thought, because honestly, you can happily grow these plants on just sticks, stakes, etc. But I like the idea of the moss bowl sort of helping the plant to stay hydrated. It hopefully will rely on me a little bit less, and I hope that the moss bowl can help to size up those leaves quite a bit. Will I continue to always have moss bowls on my plants? I'm not sure, but it's definitely an avenue I want to try out in the new year. In 2025, I want to keep exploring moss bowls and see how it affects the growth of some of my favorite houseplants, especially the ones that are able to size up and sort of look like dramatically different when you give them something to climb on. I'm actually quite tempted to cut it right there. And as you see, I have my scissors. I am so close to cutting it. But I realized that if I cut it, it will affect the unfurling of that newest leaf. And I don't want to lose it because I think it's going to be a little bit more variegated than the previous leaf, which, by the way, isn't extremely variegated because of me. I gave it a little bit too little light, and so it turned out really green. But the plant is, it looks like it's sort of recovering itself, and that newest leaf there looks like it's more variegated than the one before it. Either way, I don't want to cut it just yet. I want to let it unfurl, and even if I do eventually cut it, that way I can propagate it and sell it or gift it to someone. But I don't want to lose this leaf. The plant's working really hard at it. Something you should never forget to do when repotting a plant is to give it some water from at the top. It sort of meshes everything together and just helps the plant to activate in its new space. Give its moss bowl a little bit of love, and don't forget to add water into that reservoir if you're using a self-watering pot. I have forgotten to do this many times, so don't be like me. And I've forgotten to do it on this very plant, my Philodendron Buono. Remember when I cut this plant? I chopped it a couple weeks ago and it has pushed out a couple new leaves since then. The new leaves are a little bit smaller, but in no time it'll eventually size up to be a normal size or even bigger. And I'm hoping it does this because I'm going to add a moss bowl to it. Again, you don't need to add moss bowls to your plants to get them to grow bigger. It can aid the process, but it's not required. I actually was just watching a video by a really big planty YouTuber who actually has her moss bowl just on a stick or a stake, and sorry, not her moss bowl, her Buono on a stick, and it has the most beautiful, huge leaves. So this isn't a requirement, but when I got my Buono, I got it very, very small. And so it's going to take a lot of time before mine gets to be that big and beautiful. So I want to help it along by adding a moss bowl. I do think it'll fill this up quickly because it's a plant that loves to push out roots, especially along the stem. But that's okay. This is just for a little bit of aid. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I plan on chopping and extending this plant continuously. Anyways, this is where it lives. Welcome to the future once again. I thought I'd give you a tiny bit of an update on how these plants are doing and how they're looking. It's been 4 days since I repotted them, and this is my Hoya DS70 sitting under a Sansi grow light. And like I mentioned, it's sitting inside of this self-watering pot that elevates it a bit. As much as I don't love these self-watering pots that make my plants really high, I actually have found a purpose for it. I think vining plants is the way to go for these pots that sort of give the plants a whole lot of light. So it's found its purpose and I think it's working well. I love how this plant can get really blushed leaves. Is that a thing? Blushed leaves when the light hits the new growth. It's going to probably kick up a fuss just a little bit. It might drop a couple new leaves. I haven't noticed anything yet, but it might do it from being repotted. I mean, I tried really hard not to touch the roots, but still, Hoya like things a certain way. It will notice the difference in its pot size. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a setback, but so far, so good. And let me just highlight the little bit of sun stressing finally happening on this sunrise. Finally. Next to it is my Buono, and it looks pretty much exactly the same, minus 2 leaves. So in that video, you might have noticed a leaf was yellowing. This one is because when I chopped the top cut and put it in here, I was top watering to help the top cut to activate, but at the same time it was sort of overwatering the existing plant, so I lost these bottom leaves, but that's okay. The plant is still doing really well. The new leaves are still coming out. They're pretty happy, and hopefully this light here can help promote that variegation, and the moss pole can add lots of hydration to it. My Anthurium warocreanum, it looks again pretty much the same. I'm leaving this leaf here, as unsightly as it may be, because whatever the plant needs to do, whatever is making it unhappy or whatever adjustment it needs to make, it can take it out on this leaf and leave this one alone. That's my hopes. It's probably false hope, but I'm gonna leave this here. Also, I've heard that Anthurium or plants in general pull nutrients from older leaves, so it may be a good idea to leave them. So I'll just leave it until it's completely done with this leaf. But so far, so good. The roots still look good. We've got some nice humidity in here. Time will tell. I can never get over this leaf. Just how big. I didn't highlight this in the repotting session. Well, I wasn't quite in the mood to talk much, but I'm always so shocked at how, let's get some light, at how big the new leaf is compared to the previous leaf. So this is the previous leaf, and then this is the leaf, the newest leaf. It's just crazy how it has sized up. Anyways, we're still looking good. It seems like I was successful in not damaging that leaf, but again, we won't know for sure until it fully hardens off. Florida Beauty, that leaf has unfurled. Isn't that pretty? Very nice. It's finally getting that variegation back, and I think the variegation is connected to light 100%, because when it got a little less light, this is the leaf that I was talking about where it was significantly less variegated, and it's a highly variegated plant, so at least the one that I have. Anyways, I'm gonna wait until this loosens up a bit, and then I might try to connect it. But do you see how hard it is? It's deliberately growing forward, so I just may end up having to chop this, which I don't want to, but it's growing really far forward. If I do though, I'll chop it and just stick it back in there. I would wait for it to harden off first. This is a plant that I would let the, not harden off, sorry. Yes, I'll let this harden off first, but I'll also wait for the cutting to callus over and then stick it right back in there. Thanks again for watching. Here are some videos I think you might enjoy. A big thanks goes out to our channel Patreon members. There's Rachel and Carla in the Diamond Falls tier, Patricia in the Piton tier, and Lynn and Lainey in the Pigeon Island tier.